Lifting community is obsessed with science. But I want to ask you a question. What all this science is based upon? And you'll say, researches. And this is a huge problem. But why is it a problem? I'm gonna cover up in this video. Talking about researches. Even in medicine, researches could not be considered as a 100% truthful source of information, despite the fact that requirements in medicine are a little bit more strict than in fitness, you know what I'm saying? And guys, I do realize that there's some sort of like pharmaceutical mafia involved, and lots of money in this shit. But talking about fitness researches, nobody's getting hurt, nobody's gonna die because some research has been done poorly. There's like almost no requirements, nobody gives a shit. And again, talking about medicine, the only research that could be considered more valuable is some sort of global research. When you survey millions of people throughout 10, 15, 20 years, and for some reason this type of approach in fitness community is not considered scientific, when in reality is way more scientific than training according to some isolated researches. Second, researches could be biased. For instance, financial reason. If I'm going to a market with a new product, I really want to push it as hard as possible, and one of the ways to do this, one of the marketing strategies that you can use, is to find some group of people, so they will do some certain research with some certain results that will make my product look better. And you might say, but this is not possible because it's science, how can you mess up with results? Guys, this is actually a very common thing. The number one requirement for any kind of research or any kind of experiment, you're not allowed to set the conditions the way it's gonna likely prove something that you really want to prove. So if you really want to prove something, you can set the conditions of this experiment in a way that will be more favorable for you. I know there are people who think that scientists are like the most honorable people on the planet Earth, which is a very common mistake. Guys, scientists are just people like you and me, and people could be different. Some people are honorable, and some people are freaking greedy motherfuckers. And you think that scientists are all purists and the only thing they care about is just truth. This is just naive. Another type of bias which is way more important, I think. You know that universities are really willing to issue as many doctors, as many articles as possible, so they can make higher scientific score. You know what I'm saying, guys? So in terms of doctorals, it is some sort of mutual agreement. There is a guy who wants to be a doctor, and there is a university that wants as many doctors having this university as alma mater. So until everything is legal and formal, it's okay. Guys, remember, legal and formal doesn't mean that it's right. So many of these articles are made for the sake of being made. Guys, I've been working on some articles, and you might have been too, and I read some articles that were written by some doctors, and I'll tell you this. It was just dog shit. It is nothing. These type of articles don't exist in a scientific world because they have zero scientific value. I already made a video about sport doesn't equal science where I covered up Dr. Mike's article, and if you look at it closely, you can see that it has absolutely zero scientific value. And universities actually forcing people to do this kind of stuff because if you don't have articles, nobody will tell you that you are a good scientist, etc., etc. So guys, this is just an inflation that we see in science nowadays. As I said before, there are many researches that could be biased because people who were in charge of this, they cared only about the fact that this research is gonna be done, okay? They didn't care about the truth behind it, so they didn't really care about results. Third, researches could be done by non-athletes. And this is the huge problem, because there is a difference between a good scientist and a good athlete.
Studies have shown that huge forces are generated in the lower back when you bend over and lift. Everyone knows that. You're supposed to bend your knees and lift with a straight back.
And many people confuse the way all this sports science is all about. Because listen guys, science is just one of the ways, almost religion and art, I believe, to describe the reality. Everything could be described with science. So you gotta be at least a decent athlete to do sport-related researches properly, because there could be many nuances that you don't know because you never did this kind of sport. Even if you are a brilliant scientist, still the only way to figure them out is to do this sport. And I'll tell you this, an average meathead will do a more valuable research than a good scientist but who actually never performed this type of sport. 100%. Fourth, vague results, vague conditions. So for instance, there is no 100% accurate way to measure muscle mass, but for some reason there are plenty of researches when we can see absolutely insignificant muscle growth, because those researches were done within like a month, a couple of months. And the difference between like different groups is usually something about like 5% and 6% and some sort of crap like this. So can you imagine how much muscle mass you can build in a couple of months, especially if you are an advanced athlete? And how freaking accurate the measurements will be when you compare two different groups. So how freaking precise measurement technique should be involved to actually measure how much muscle mass you built. And this is what we actually don't have an access to yet. All these differences in like 5%, 7%, like 10%, 11%, it just doesn't mean anything because it just could be a freaking mistake. And another problem is that human body is not that really stable. And if you're not a novice lifter, you can't really say that you made some significant progress for the previous couple of weeks or a month. To figure something out, you gotta stretch those researches over time. And as I said before, there's no way you can compare like muscle mass of different individuals. That's so freaking stupid, especially when we're talking about weight conditions. We can't really estimate the effort this particular individual put into this exercise and yada yada yada. So many factors are involved, so it's just a chaos, a mess. And until there's a freaking camera recording everything 24/7, you can't actually tell what's really happening during this research. And the only way to actually objectively measure something is to measure numbers like strength, like bigger number on deadlifts, for instance, okay, speed, jump height. These are the numbers that you can objectively measure. So for instance, how the real scientific research should look like. You pick two different groups of people, they measure their max on their sumo or conventional deadlifts. And athletes from one group train only sumo deadlifts, and the guys from the second group train only conventional deadlifts. And this is gonna be a freaking fun experiment to do, and you'll see that there's a great carryover if you do deadlifts to conventional and vice versa, and yada yada yada. So you can come up with a conclusion after this kind of research, okay? But the problem is that you don't need this type of research, as I said before, because we have an access to practice, there's way more people involved, so results are more precise. Fifth, people who blindly follow researches don't have an opinion on their own. They just have an opinion according to this particular research. And there's a new research are popping up, guess what? They completely change their opinions. What happened to Mike and Jeff Nepard? Jeff Nepard made a video when he and Dr. Mike were doing damage control.
The way I ranked these exercises, many people understandably thought that I think you build a bigger back with a one-arm cable pull down than with the barbell row. But I don't think that, and I didn't think that when I made the tier list video.
And Dr. Mike was asked on how slow your eccentrics are, and he said 2 seconds. When in reality, what 2 seconds you talking about? And when he was asked, will your muscles grow better because you do slow eccentrics?
A lot of people will assume that I think there's a direct hypertrophy benefit to them, and I don't think that.
So tell me, what the fuck is going on? And guys, listen, changing your opinion is okay if you are admitting that you were wrong. But changing your opinion and saying stuff like, actually, I wasn't wrong. Matter of fact, this is you who didn't get me right. This is your fault. I was right. This is just so freaking stupid. And talking about researches and how your opinion is based on these researches. So you're saying that your training methods are superior and the most efficient because they are based on this particular researches. But what's gonna happen within like next 5 years? There's gonna be different researches, and your training methods that you think that are superior right now will be considered as absolutely not optimal. So guys, how can we clearly distinguish if something is optimal or not? If we see that researchers is not a way actually. Practice, guys. People act like they invented lifting weights for like a year ago or something. But guys, people got jacked 10 years ago, 100 years ago, thousands years ago. So you act like your modern stuff is superior, but it doesn't make any sense because we can see how athletes used to train like 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago and they achieved something and they got some certain results. But you believe that your training methods are superior because they're based on research, but you actually never proved it with practice. So what's more superior? Believe in something that you can actually see, or believe in something that's been proven only in theory, but we can never see how it works in practice. So what's more scientifical? You tell me. And think about this. Imagine you were born like 100 years ago. How would you get jacked then? There were no researches. I mean, there were like a couple of researches, but how can you get jacked and strong if you were born 100 years ago without researches? But for some reason, people got jacked and strong. So probably researches is not an answer. And if you see a guy who tries to prove something using just researches, you gotta know that this guy doesn't know shit about lifting, or he just trying to manipulate your opinion, because when you're using researches, you actually look better from a general population perspective. And most of the people who go to gyms, they are general population, they are just pencil necks, and they are not advanced athletes. So guys, what's the conclusion? The conclusion is there are some researches that could be valuable. The problem is that you don't know what research is exactly. It's like, imagine you have like 10 candies and some of them poisoned, and you don't know what candy is poisoned. So would you eat it? It's like news, guys. The same stuff. News, media, any kind of statement the government making. Do you believe 100% what the government says? I really doubt it. I don't think you're so dumb. So when you see all these media reports, how do you actually comprehend the information? You're thinking probably like, did it really happen? And if it happened the way they describe it, or it was a little bit different. And the problem is that we don't have an access to all the information, so we just can suggest. And you may ask, listen man, we got it, but what my training methods should be based on? How do I figure out what's the right way to train? That's simple, guys. Use these: common sense, logic, basic knowledge of physics and anatomy, and what's the most important, analyze what other athletes do and see if this works on you or doesn't. And that's that simple. It's simple, but it's not easy. Remember, there are no magic pills, and nobody will tell you how to train better. The only person who is in charge of your body is you are. So consider your lifting journey is some sort of like ongoing experiment. If you're not satisfied with results, just change the conditions. And what is the satisfying result? If you are making progress, that's it. That means that you train efficiently. And this is why guys who look like complete textbook meatheads and bro scientists like Eric Bugenhagen, for instance, are indeed the real scientists. Because if you ask Eric how he trained all these years, and he will tell you that he tried out every freaking exercise, every freaking way to train, and he figured out what worked better for him. So this is the scientific approach. And guys who claim to be science-based lifters in reality are just bro scientists. This term was really popular like 10-15 years ago. This kind of meme, bro scientists. It was all about guys who just all talk and no go. You know what I'm saying? Just skinny dudes, fat dudes in gyms. They were just talking nonsense. They were just making theories on how to train, but never actually worked hard, and they never had good physiques. So these were bro scientists back then. And nowadays, bro scientists are considered as science-based lifters. Can you imagine how the things changed? So guys, I hope this video clarified the situation a little bit because it's a very controversial topic, and I believe that I said what many people wanted to say but couldn't formulate it well. So guys, stay jacked and I'll see you in the next video.
After all, do you really need to lift those sorts of heavy weights in such a way? Training the spine in that way isn't necessarily helpful for everyday life.